Talk Shoes. Recorded live.
Hello and welcome to the Castle of Horror interview segment where we talk to writers and creators of today's genre worlds. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, creator of the Alex Van Helsing novels. This week we're talking, this is very exciting, we're talking to P.J. Hoover, author of books for children and teens, including Tut, the story of my immortal life, which is new from Macmillan Tor, and Solstice. Now, Tut came out this past September and was just now named to the Texas Lone Star list. That is a big deal for 2015, and so I'm going to want you to talk about that. When not writing, the Austin-based author, P.J. Hoover, spends time with her husband and kids and enjoys practicing Kung Fu. I'm going to want to ask you what kind of Kung Fu, solving Rubik's Cubes, and watching Star Trek, and I'm going to ask you what kind of Star Trek. Now, Tut, the story of my immortal life. First of all, say hello, Tricia.
Hello, everyone.
So, all right, Tut, the story of my immortal life came out in this past September, just named to the Lone Star list. Can you explain to me, first of all, what is this book about? Now, I actually know, I've heard you read from the book at a very well-attended event down in McAllen. But, PJ, I would love for you to describe for the reader, if they haven't heard of it, what is the elevator pitch on this book?
Okay, so the book is about King Tut, who is immortal, and the thing is he's only 14. He's living in modern-day Washington, D.C. with his cat Horace, and this dorky kid at school wants to be his best friend. This new girl shows up who's very mysterious, and she's also kind of pretty. And then King Tut's uncle shows up, and his uncle is actually the one who's been locked in the tomb for 3,000 years, and so he's upset about that. He's out for revenge. So it's like a crazy chase adventure around Washington, D.C. with lots of Egyptian mythology mixed in.
And this is a major publisher. I mean, you know, and it's a gorgeous hardback that you've got.
Thank you.
So, you know, I before I ask you like about the responses from readers to the book, I wanted to ask you. Now, you recently got named to the Texas Lone Star list. That means something if you're in Texas. I don't know if people necessarily know what that is outside of the worlds that you and I run in. What is the Lone Star list?
The Lone Star list is a list of 20 books that are picked each year by Texas librarians, and it's recommended reading, sometimes required reading at mostly the middle school level. And so basically it means every middle school kid in Texas is going to be seeing the book, hearing about the book, seeing the cover, being familiar with what it's about. And so that's why I think it's such a big deal. And I think it is recognized outside of Texas by other librarians, people in the book industry.
Absolutely. No, I mean, I can tell you, if you're on the Lone Star list, there will not be a middle school, certainly in the state, but oftentimes in the country, where you won't be able to go and find that book. It is absolutely. I can tell you, you're going to be exposed to basically every middle school student in the state at the very least, and yeah, certainly, you know, Lone Star books that I've seen. You go around, you know, you'll be in Minnesota, and you'll go to the local middle school library, and there it will be. So, I mean, congratulations. That is,
Thank you. I'm very, very happy.
Okay. So I was looking at your Amazon listing. I assume, by the way, are you one of those readers or writers who refreshes your Amazon posting every day to look at what reviews people are leaving?
Maybe not every day, but yeah.
I mean, everybody does it, and you've gotten some really nice reviews. I mean, you go on there and people are saying things, you know, that you might expect. This is about a middle grade, power wielding young boy, you know, and so there's definitely a feel. So people are comparing you to Rick Riordan. They're comparing you to the Harry Potter novels. I mean, how do you take stuff like that? Do you ever like go, well, I actually don't want to be compared to something else like that. I want to be my own thing, or you know, how do you take that?
No, I think being compared to people like, let's say, Rick Riordan is probably one of the best compliments out there, because you look at those books and the impact that they've had on the kid reading community, you know, the Harry Potter books, stuff like that, and to be compared with something like that to me is a huge compliment. It means that people are comparing my stories to stories that have connected with, you know, millions of kids worldwide, and so that to me is a huge big deal.
And I guess it's also a way for people to, you know, if the whole point is to get a book into the hands of a middle school student you're talking to, and say you will like this because, you know, it's in, you know, it involves magic, it involves mythology, it involves, a Prince on the Run, and you can like it, and if you have to mention another author that they already know. So yeah, no, I mean that totally makes sense, and yet I've encountered writers in the past who are like, I really don't want to be compared to Thomas Pynchon. I think that I'm inventing my own thing,
No, compare me all you want. And I think the other thing that's important with comparing is, if you're talking to your basic kid who lives around the corner from you, they might not know all the books that we as writers know, and so I think that's where we really have to compare it to the major titles that they're going to recognize. And so I think that's why we go to our Rick Riordans, our Hunger Games, our Harry Potters, comparisons like that.
It's funny to imagine, that whole old Aristotelian thing of there being like 7 basic plots. It's almost as though we have there's 7 basic authors. There's Riordan. There's there's Edgar Allan Poe.
Yeah, exactly.
We just sort of pick one when we're trying to describe what. But one thing that I notice is different. Now you weren't. It says in your bio that you were a professional. You were a coder, I think, before you were writing. Is that right?
Right. I was a computer engineer, chip designer. Yep.
All right. Oh, chip designer. Oh my God. So the brain must. But so that means if you started writing in the last, I don't know, decade or so.
Right.
One thing that strikes me that's very different from, say, the previous generation of writers. Think about when Jordan was getting started, or George when Martin with Game of Thrones was getting started. At that time, you'd put out a book, and maybe you'd get reviewed by Publishers Weekly or whatever. But the whole universe that they have now totally doesn't exist. Now, or it didn't exist then. Now, for instance, you put out Tut. There's going to be bloggers who are reviewing it. There's going to be Twitter users who are going to be tweeting about it. There's going to be Goodreads, which now belongs to Amazon, and people write their reviews there. So whereas it used to be you might be lucky to get a review in Publishers Weekly, maybe, and Dragon, maybe. Now you might get 300 or 400 reviews. And, and a lot of those are from actual readers. And I wondered, how do you engage with your readers out there? Or do you? I'm curious if you have a dialogue going with all these people who are reviewing you, but are also, in a sense, good old-fashioned audience.
For me, I only engage with people who seek me out. So if I, happen to stumble across a review, I'm probably not going to bring note of it, good or bad. I'm not going to bring note of it on Facebook or anything like that. But if the reviewer actually, seeks me out and, mentions me in a Twitter comment or on a Facebook feed or something like that and lets me know about the review, then I'm happy to, I'm excited to talk to them about it. And also, I think something that we also get now that that I think, writers in the past didn't get is emails from readers. I just got an email yesterday from a little 12-year-old girl who had read the book, and so that's something that was not nearly as easy to do 10, 15 years ago. So that's a really fun way to engage with the readers also.
It was next to impossible then. And yeah, and of course it's rife with all of this possible disaster. Any time that you, and I'm not trying to be dark, but there have been writers out there. Now, I don't do this, and I can swear under oath I don't do this, but there are writers out there, somebody writes a review, and let's say they make a factual error. Like they say, this thing takes place in D.C., but this description of Union Station is totally wrong. Union Station is nowhere near Capitol Hill. And you want to go, what are you talking about? Union Station is right on Capitol Hill. I know it very well. And you can't.
The
rules of the game say you cannot.
And at least it's liberating to know those are the rules, that you just have to step back and not say anything about it. Because then if you know that and you stick to that rule, then it's easy to go with it. It's a hard, fast rule. You don't break it.
Boy, I got to tell you, it's tough, though. Because we're writers, we're argumentative people. So you're like, no, I've been there 1,000 times. It is that way. Or, no, leather does crackle like that. I'm thinking of actual arguments that people have had with their readers. And at the same time, you're right. In a sense, this is the trade-off. Because because it's so much easier now, getting to hear from a young reader who says, hey, this really lifted my spirits for the week that I was reading or whatever. That's something that you would never have had a chance to experience if you had started writing, say, in the 1970s.
Exactly.
It's just not there. So I'm curious about your process. Like when you're working on a book. I mean, first of all, did you sell this book already written or on a treatment?
I sold it already written.
So
but then I had to rewrite the whole thing after that. So.
Oh, all right. Wow. Okay. So before I get back to your just process in general, if you were writing from scratch, so you had written an entire book because you wanted to write the book. Okay, this Tut thing, right?
Uh-huh.
And then you shopped it around to publishers. So what do you mean you ended up rewriting it?
Well, so I started this book. I always say it's like my Calypso novel. I started it seven and a half years ago, and so I revised it at the time. I had received rejections at the time. I'd revised it some more. I set it aside for 2.5 years, and then I picked it up and revised it one more time, and we sent it out to publishers, and that's when it was actually, that's when Tor bought the book. And then my editor sent me a 14-page long email telling me all the things I had to change that basically came down to the fact that I had to rewrite the book. And so that's but the thing that remained the same through all the revisions, through all the rewrites, was the character of Tut. And that's really the thing that I fell in love with when I started writing the story, was the character, his voice, his what he does on a daily basis. And so
how do you describe his voice? What does it take for you to get into that voice when you're describing him?
So Tut is this, 14-year-old sarcastic kid. He's like my middle school son, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's just, it's that fun age where you're just, you're hitting puberty, and you don't know what's out there in the world for you. And so, that's kind of how he feels like he knows everything, and yet he doesn't. And I think that's what we see in kids so much. That's how I felt when I was a kid, for sure. And so I think that's the voice that I loved, because it was so approachable to me. Just that sarcastic but sincereness that he has.
Yeah, when I heard you do a reading in McAllen, I remember it was this whole scene involving jockeying around, sitting next to the right person on a bus, if I recall. and all of that just seemed very real, But to be able to do that, you have to think back, what is it like to be a kid of that age, and not the most popular, not the least popular, and sort of jockeying, and that maybe it helps that you have do you think it helps?
I think it definitely
a kid
helps.
of that age? Yeah.
Yes, I do. Yes, I have a 13-year-old and a 10-year-old, and it helps in everything.
So, what kind of stuff got removed in the editor's notes? And for the reader, for the listener, let me just say what this is like, and I've experienced this a lot. You send out the book. The editor wants the book, and one of the first things they get, and I assume this was the same, they send you a letter that runs maybe like 2 pages long or more, and it involves it's not like nitty-gritty like spelling errors. It's like, I think this entire subplot maybe needs to be shortened, or maybe needs to be removed, or this character is not working for me. Major surgery kind of stuff.
Right.
And, and usually they give you a deadline to do the rest of that, to do that stuff. Is that what happened here?
So yeah, except my letter happened to be 14 pages long, not 2.
Holy mackerel.
Sadly. And, there wasn't so much of a deadline set for the book, but, I knew when I wanted the book to come out, and I didn't want it to push too far. So I knew really, it's motivating enough to me to know that the date that it comes out is actually going to be dependent on how fast I can turn those revisions around.
Right. For them to be able to know comfortably that they can do something with it and rely on it. I actually had an experience once with a book where they said, okay, remove all the adult characters. Removing all the adult characters meant removing literally like a third of the book.
Right.
And then replacing it, putting back a third of the book, all new different book to replace what was taken out. Have you ever been to D.C.? I mean, do you know D.C. really well?
I did. I grew up right outside of D.C., so I was there for, the first 20 years of my life.
No, I had no idea. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So, all right. Have you ever been to? This is strange, but there are these things over near Catholic University that look like a bunch of really like Washington era nuclear silos. I think it's called the McCarran, the McCarran Monument or the McCarran Reservoir. Have you ever? This is a random question, and it's
Yeah,
risky.
no, I've never been there.
Oh my God! Well, all right. I think.
But I go back every summer, so I can go.
Yeah, you'll see it. It'll give you shivers, and you go, "What in the heck is that thing?" And if you're like me, you'll be like, "How can I fit this thing into my next book?" Because
and that is the thing. You want to fit everything in everywhere, and it's just sprinkling in the right information, I guess. It's really what's hard to do. It's hard to limit yourself.
That's really, really cool. When you were describing this boy growing up in Washington, D.C., did you go back, or did you just work off your own memory? And so he's essentially running around in a Washington, D.C. of a short while ago?
No,
or...
I did. I go back every summer for a few weeks, and now that I have the kids, we get to do the tourist thing all over again, go to all the monuments, do all the fun stuff. And so there was lots of, every time I'd want him to be somewhere, like Meridian Hill Park or something like that, I would go and I'd check it out. It was back, we went to the top of the Washington Monument, so that was fun to do, yeah. And so,
well, and that's actually a wonderful way to experience a city is it gives you an excuse to go places and pay closer attention that you might not go if you were literally just visiting.
Absolutely.
Visiting your parents, you might not drop by some of these stranger places, but if you go, well, I got a book to work on, then you can knock around. That's really cool. Okay, so I wanted to ask you about your writing process, and by that I mean, you, PJ, have a book that is due. I'm going to make this up. It's what is this right now? It's December. So let's say you have a book that's due in May, and it's going to be a regular-sized book.
Uh-huh.
I don't know. It's going to be anywhere from 50 to 75,000 words is probably what they'd ask for. So how do you make that happen? I mean, what is the first thing you do? Do you create a calendar? Do you, create an outline and then say, I'm going to work on it from 6 to 9 every night? I mean, how does a book happen for you?
So I create an outline, for sure, and if I was working with an editor on this book, I would definitely work through that outline with the editor, especially on the major beats of the plot. Probably not every small, tiny plot detail because so much of that can change, but I would definitely try to make sure that the basic plot was outlined properly and made sense and wasn't too complicated and was appropriate for the market. I can get through a first draft very quickly. I'm pretty motivated, self-motivated when it comes to actually writing out that first draft.
What's very quickly? Is that
I would say if I was starting a fresh book, under 2 months. Yeah.
Very good. Wow.
Yeah, and then I would, do some revisions on my own before I would start sending it out to a couple of my critique partners, and then once I got through those revisions.
You write every day, or do you write on the weekends? Or
I write every day for the most part, especially if I'm in that first draft stage.
How many words a day? I mean, like, do you set a goal, or do you just or do you do it by scenes?
No, I would try to do about 2,000 words a day. Some days are more, some days are less, but yeah.
That's fantastic. I mean, 2,000 words. So that's what Stephen King recommends, actually.
Yeah, but if you actually sit down and are actually writing it, you can write them pretty quickly. It doesn't take horribly long to do it. It's that you're talking a couple hours of writing. So whether it's in the evening or in the morning or whenever you write best, it's not a huge commitment of time. No,
that's totally true. And it's funny. Stephen King is so religious about it that he's like, I'll do my 2,000, and even if I'm in the middle of a word, I'll just stop there and wander off and done his writing for the day, and that's it. That's fantastic. So you'll just do this. So you basically say, hey kids and everybody, I'm working on a book for the next 2 months, and so leave me alone. This is my primary goal for this 2-month period.
Right, and especially now that the kids are a little bit older, that is easier. When the kids were younger, I couldn't write when they were in the house awake, basically. So now that they're older, they can be on the computer themselves, they can play video games, and then we can hang out after I get my 2,000 words in.
Yeah. Do you write at home, or do you go out somewhere?
I write a lot at home. I also have a couple places around town here in Austin that I like to go write with friends. And cause it's nice to get out. It's nice to be held accountable. It's also nice to get out and see people because sometimes, sitting at home alone can be a little bit lonely, boring. Yeah, so.
I have a hard time writing at home. I don't know if it's because there's TV going in the other room and stuff like that. I mean, it's all mind, right? You could force yourself to write at home. But I loved, when I was in Austin, I always used to go out to Mozart's, the coffee shop. I know some of the writer crowd that you run with used to hang out at Spider House. I don't know if
we used to do Spider House. We've been going to Dragon's Lair Comics recently, which is a fun place to write.
Really?
Yeah, it's a great
I
place.
did a signing at Dragon's Lair.
Yeah, they have all the big gaming tables there, so there's tons of room to sit there during the day, bring your coffee in, and yeah. So.
No, that's the new Dragon's Lair, isn't it? It's over
It is.
on like Burnett. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So once you're actually done, if you've got a book due, so you actually mentioned readers, so you'll finish the entire book, and then the reason I'm asking you all this stuff is because I feel like people who are going to be listening are actually, people who are writers already or just want to hear about your process. But you're done with it. You literally hand a book that hasn't been published before over to friends to read, or
I have about 2 readers that I trust to read my stuff ahead of time. And if I was on a super tight schedule, I might skip that stage and send it off to my editor directly, but generally that's not the case. Generally I have time to send it to my 2 critique partners, who will give me feedback, and then I would send it to my agent also to get feedback from my agent, and, keep revising as I go.
Are they going to tell? I know an agent won't be afraid to, but your friends aren't afraid to say, this isn't working for me, or I'm not understanding this, or. No,
and that's I think it's really important to find the right people, and so I do have 2 people that I work with, and it's trial and error finding the right people to read your work, and really you want to make sure that you're getting comments that they're going to be honest in what they tell you, and get that first reaction from them. It's important.
That's it is really, really tough. I mean, I've done it before, where somebody will ask me, a friend, and I'll say, okay, well, this worked for me, this didn't work for me. But to be honest with you, there's always this little fear in my head is, are they not going to like me anymore? If I tell them, if I say, I think the end isn't really working for me, or this character, I don't get enough feel for who this character is, what they're about, I'm always afraid that they're going to feel like I'm rejecting them.
Yeah, and there is that concern. I mean, but the people who've been reading my work, we've been reading each other's stuff for 5 or 6 years now. So
yeah,
it's a while.
And that you're right that they're not going anywhere. And the funny thing is, if you flip it around, that's a totally irrational fear, because of course, if somebody else reads my work and they say, listen, I don't understand who this character is, they're all over the map, that doesn't necessarily hurt my feelings. I mean,
right.
It doesn't. It might make me be real disappointed that it's not working, but I'm not going to go, well, I'm not talking to that person anymore. It's and what's funny, Neil Gaiman we talked about this last week, but Neil Gaiman made the comment when he was talking about the Graveyard Book, that when people, you send your book to readers, and if 2 of them say the ending doesn't work because it happens too fast, both of them say that, that's probably true. If either of them suggest how exactly to fix that, the how to fix it is really up to you, and you're liable to get really wildly divergent how to fix it. But the problem will probably be reliable if more than one person
right.
recognizes it. Gosh, is it so Solstice, for instance, is a teen book, correct?
Correct.
So, and this is your middle grade. You've switched audiences. And is it different writing for middle grade versus writing for teens?
Yeah, it really is. It's a lot different. I think, number one, in what material you can actually put in the books. One of the main reasons I had to revise Tut so much is I think the romance in there was a little too much for the intended age group.
What do you mean by that? Like what was too much?
Well, I mean, I think at one point King Tut was promised to this, had a harem of 50 Egyptian princesses, and that had to go because it really didn't fit in a middle grade book. Not that it wasn't enjoyable to write.
Referencing it, so even the reference to these things had to be tossed.
Yeah, because you have to imagine, there's 3rd graders reading middle grade books. That's the general age is 3rd grade and up. And so you just picture, look at a 3rd grader that and imagine them reading the book and thinking about what's appropriate for that age group or not appropriate. And
well, I mean, I'm not disagreeing with you, but I often think about the fact that I think you're more or less the generation that I am, and we watched Grease. And I think most of it just went right over our head,
And there is that, and that's what people say. However, do you want half of your book to go over the reader's heads? That's the other question. Yeah.
Well, there's also the fact that the way it was explained to me, because I said, why do I need to remove the references to incest in the backstory about Lord Byron. I was like, that is true, you know, and it's interesting. And they were like, yes, but if you include that, there will be teachers who won't want it. There will be teachers who won't want it in their classroom. There will be librarians who don't want it. And you can get on your high horse all you want, but if you want to be accessible to everybody in the state, then, you know, you might lose this one line and nobody's going to, you know, and that's, you know, I don't know. That was the way it was explained to me, and you know.
It's hard to argue with it, yeah.
Yeah, no, it is. It's reality.
Yep.
You know. Sometimes I have fun, though, when I go to school visits, though, explaining, like, what got cut.
Yes.
Speaking of, so school visits is a thing that, you know, if you're, like, if you write for adults, if you write, you know, fantasy, sword and sorcery novels, adult horror novels, contemporary fiction, all that stuff is really great, but you don't do school visits. School visits are the universe of the world that you walk in, PJ, where you're doing middle grade, and so what is that world like? I mean, you know, I've run into you on a lot of, like, library visits, but tell me a little bit about going to schools.
So going to schools for me is a ton of fun, first off, because you're actually getting up there in front of your target audience. You know, it's one thing to, you know, go to the library shows and talk with the librarians, but to actually be talking to the kids who are going to be the true readers of your books is a really cool experience to me, and try to connect with them on whatever level you can. And so I talk to third grade and up, basically, is what I'll do. Mostly elementary and middle schools, I would say. Some high schools, but it doesn't seem like high schools have as many author visits coming in, maybe because it's harder to coordinate the schedules. But, yeah, it's amazing. These kids, I mean, every age is different. That's the one thing I notice in the school visits. Every single grade is different. Every school I go to is different. Sometimes the kids have been prepared for the visit. Sometimes the kids have never heard of me when I walk in there. And so I think it's being flexible, you know, knowing that really there can be things that go right, things that can go wrong, and just being able to go with the flow, really, when it comes right down to it.
And when you're scheduled as a, like, for instance, when we were in McAllen, how many school visits did you do?
So I did the one day of presentations, but it was 6 or 7 presentations, I think.
6 or 7. Isn't that amazing?
I
mean, in other words, you are owned by the school for that day, and they set you up, and you've got a projector, or you've got whatever you do. I don't know. Maybe you do exercises with the students. You know, like I don't mean like give me 20.
Calisthenics.
I mean like activities, and you know. And or maybe you do a straight presentation. But regardless, you've got these classroom periods churning in and out all day. So you're gonna do the same thing like 6 or 7 times.
Yeah. It's definitely it's you know, enjoyable, but it also by the end of the day, you know, you can't even hardly stand to hear yourself talk.
Right. Well, and what's funny is you recognize that the anecdotes that you told that are funny at 8 o'clock in the morning are still funny in the afternoon if you can maintain your ability to tell them as though it's the first time you've told this today.
Exactly.
You know? And that's luckily that's something that teachers understand, because I remember turning to a teacher once and saying, you know, I'm really sorry you have to listen to this again. And she's like, I have to listen to myself all day. You know? But like, what kind of questions do you tend to get from the students who you're talking to?
You know, once again, it's going to depend on the age group. When I go in and I talk to the elementary school kids, I think the biggest questions I get are like with some of the tie-ins I have for the King Tut book. Like, for example, I have a Minecraft world that goes along with the book.
How did you do that? You just made a Minecraft world?
Yeah, actually, my son and his friends, you know, designed it. I did some work on it, but they were the main designers. But yeah, it's a Minecraft server that kids can log into and visit the world that's in the book.
Oh,
and
my gosh.
That's actually really popular with the kids. I know that's probably really surprising. But, yeah, so that's like, I would say half the questions are about the Minecraft. You know, how do they log in? What are they going to find on the server? There's also a video game that goes along with it. They're really interested in that, too. And, you know, what I try to promote with the video game is to promote computer programming along with reading, to try to do the cross-curriculum, you know. And so that's something that I think the teachers are interested in. But the kids are also, you know, you get the kids that are young and they still are really excited about all the possibilities of what they can do and what they can be.
What makes your ears prick up? Like when you're talking, you know, and you could tell when students have suddenly become more or less engaged. I mean, what do you find all of a sudden really awakens
I've noticed a couple things. I retell a couple Greek myths in my presentations, and I noticed that that's very, very popular with all age groups. I can hear a pin drop basically during the time when I'm doing the retellings, and so that's a lot of fun. I also noticed that when I mention that I'm a third-degree black belt in Kung Fu, you can see their faces kind of change at that.
What kind of Kung Fu are you practicing?
It's a Shaolin Do.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Very, very beautiful. That's outstanding. Wow. So, there are so many different forms. I remember the guy in Highlander. I used to be really into Highlander, right? And he was all into Hungar, which is a less beautiful form, but it's very brutal looking, you know?
Ah.
So it's very slow and very low, but it has this sort of, but you know, it's not nearly as fluid as some of the other forms. But that's really neat. I can imagine that really that intrigues students, because they're like, you know, you think of writers as being, I don't know, these Jawa-like creatures who just kind of like huddle, you know, over their machines and produce work, and you know, and I've heard several. What do you call yourselves? There's like a whole group of female writers in Texas.
Or the Texas Sweethearts?
The Texas Sweethearts. Yes. I mean, so you're also overcoming what must be some gender stereotypes about the creation of work
And I think, you know, the engineering background also helps with that. It's something that also they aren't quite expecting normally when I talk. So I think that's something that surprises them too. So it's nice when you can catch them by surprise with something, and I do try to do that in my presentations.
Absolutely. You know, and I heard what you said about the present. If any like librarians are listening, you know, the more they're prepared for you, the more they've maybe heard of the book before, or watched a book trailer, or played with maybe your Minecraft that you've already made, you know, the more they get out of the visit when you're there.
Exactly.
Oh gosh. Well, PJ, I've totally kept you on longer than I promised I would, and I'm so thankful. Is there anything that you would like people to know, or that you want to tell people about the book before I let you go?
No, I would just suggest everyone check out my website at pjhoover.com. You know, lots of information, lots of extras for the book, like the Minecraft world and the video game, and book trailers, all that fun, good stuff.
Did you make your own trailer?
I did make my own trailer.
Made your own trailer. This is really wild. So you bring sort of a kind of a cottage industry attitude to the promotion of your book, which is another thing that's kind of totally new. I mean, I think if you were publishing in 1989, you know, I don't think you would have been expected to create a book trailer, nor would it have existed.
But I think that's the thing with marketing to the kids is the more you can think like them, like with the Minecraft world or the video game, the more they're going to be into it, the more excited they're going to be, and that's what we want. Is we want kids to be excited about reading and want to, you know, keep on learning about the world.
I love that you actually genuinely mean that. I mean that's fantastic. All right, PJ Hoover, new to the Texas Lone Star list for 2015. Thank you so much for being on. I've learned a lot about listening to your process, and I've really enjoyed talking to you, and I hope we get a chance to talk to you again sometime. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jason. Yeah.
All right. Have a lovely day. Bye.
Bye-bye.